So I'm really excited to show what we have today and talk with Niko and Aaron about some of the great stuff that we're going to show you, and then hopefully walk through as much of the new features as we can. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to just pause here for a second and I want to ask a couple questions just to Niko and Aaron about some of the new the new scroll to interaction behavior and things like that. And I think a great place to start is just with Niko. Can you give us just a quick overview of what is the scroll to action and what does that mean?
Yeah, I think on a super high level, the scroll to action is just a way for you to make the prototype or a container, like a scrollable container inside a prototype, to scroll to a specific location on when kind of like something happens. So kind of like on click, scroll to the specific particular location.
Awesome. Awesome. Aaron, anything to add? No.
Yeah, so one thing that I was particularly excited was not just scrolling vertically, but also horizontally, and also multi-axis as well too. Some of the use cases that I was excited about were maybe maps or documentation websites where you have one scrolling container here and another one here, and you click on one and this scrolls. So that's super exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. And you know, is there any part of this that you're most excited about to see how people might use this or anything like that? Or
Yeah. So this is the first time that Figma has on-screen interactions within the same frame. And I think this is going to be huge in reducing the amount of top-level frames. Some of the expert designers out there may have been able to do this feature before, but they used a lot of different frames and it was a bit hacky. So this is the first time for on-screen interactions, and I think there's still a long way to go.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see what the community starts creating with this. Niko, I mean, is there anything that you found particularly exciting or are really looking forward to?
It's like definitely seconding what Aaron has been saying. Of like we've been traditionally been very kind of like a screen to screen flow, step-by-step kind of prototyping tool. And I think this is definitely a super interesting first step. And then with like interactive components that we announced at Config, like we're definitely going to take this to another layer, you could say.
Are we keeping a tally of the jokes? Because we gotta. One question that I've kind of been interested in, and this tends to happen a lot when we do feature launches. I'm always really interested in this part of the story too. That how did we arrive at the name Scroll To? You know,
Yeah.
Some other people may have see this with different names and different products, but how did we get there?
Yeah, I mean, naming just always has been, and probably just will be like the gnarliest part of a project, kind of, because it's like also something you can also change like a week before you launch it, which is something that we did with like components and variants, so, like some stuff there. And I think that not interactive components, for Scroll To, we were thinking a little bit about like Scroll To versus anchor links, and anchor links was kind of like the more approachable one, the one that we heard kind of like more people talk about more naturally in that way. But we also realized that since you can use it to scroll containers as well, it becomes more like a feature, like an action really, that you can apply to different kinds of containers. And so that's kind of like, that's a little bit of how we decided that to use Scroll To, because it feels more encompassing of the variety of use cases that you can do. Yeah, I think that's kind of like how we arrived at that.
Awesome. Yeah, and we're going to look at some of those more interesting use cases that may fall out of the bounds of like what you might have already thought you'd be using Scroll To for. So that's great. One last question before we actually start diving in here, Aaron. I understand that, as you mentioned, you started recently, and this was actually your first project working at Figma. What was it like shipping your first feature?
Yeah, this was my first project. Yeah, I've led projects at other companies, but this was particularly unique. Figma has a lot of different code bases and a lot of different programming languages as well too. And so I had to put on my investigator detective hat and just get a sense of the lay of the land and figuring out how to make this work with our current code base. So that was really exciting. And also working with our team the design with Niko and product and other engineers on the team. Super collaborative, super cool, and immediate feedback as well too. As an engineer, sometimes there's a delay in getting some feedback from everybody, but this was pretty immediate, and so that was really cool. As far as like the actual process, you know, I spun up a quick prototype, but we worked in an iterative fashion, and so we wanted to add features, and so that was really cool. And finally, you know, as an engineer, you know, sometimes you have some ideas, and one thing that I thought of what we should add was a custom offset. And so, you know, I talked to the designer and product, and they were super supportive of that as well too. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, awesome. In fact, I think that that's probably the offset example. I think is one that people I think might be familiar with. I think that that's something that you've probably seen in other tools and other places where you can set to specific offsets. I know the team pushed that a bit further, and now we can actually do dynamic offsets and things like that too as well. So we're going to look at a couple of those examples as we go through. This is awesome. I'm ready to get started and dive in, and let's take a look at how this actually works. I want to show off a bunch of examples, some best practices. Aaron, Niko, as we're going through this, if you have anything else that you want to add or any examples you want to show, please don't hesitate to stop me, and we'll take a closer look at some of that stuff as well. But without further ado, let's scroll. Scroll over Beethoven? I don't know. I'm gonna work on it. We'll figure it out. Great. So a first place that I want to start is a little bit of understanding how the scroll behavior is going to work in Figma, right? So as Niko mentioned before, what scrolling allows you to do, and what scroll to action allows you to do, is actually scroll further down on a particular frame by having an interaction. And when I say down, it could actually be in any direction, but most commonly, you've probably seen this on websites where a navigation link at the top of a website will take you further down the page, usually with an animation of some kind of timing on it, so that you can actually see the content as you're going by the page as well. So before we can actually enable this in Figma, you have to make sure that you actually have a page that can already scroll. When you're creating your pages of content, I often find that I'll make a page like this. As I'm adding things, like if I'm making a home page or a marketing page or something like that, I'll just continue to make the frame larger, and I'll have a full example of a page. This might make a little bit more sense if we look over here, which is a great way to sort of preview your content, understand your page, look at it. And you may be inclined to just go ahead and present it as it is right now. And that's fine, and that works. And in fact, actually, I'm just gonna go back to our basic example here. Let me try that again. There we go. And this works. And in fact, it almost looks like it's scrolling right now already, because I have more content than was actually visible. But in reality, this is actually just the prototyping view trying to be kind of nice to us and let us actually look at the whole page. If you change your zoom settings, you'll notice that we can't actually scroll anything. So I'm set to just show me the entire frame, and it doesn't actually scroll up and down. It's because we don't have any content that extends beyond the frame. In fact, if we come back to our example, we can see that everything here is actually contained inside of the frame. If we go to prototyping mode, we'll see that we have no scrolling enabled. So there's actually no scrolling within this frame, even though it kind of looked like it in our preview over here. What we need to do is add content or create a way in which content is actually extending beyond the frame. And the easiest way to do that is to, once you have your full page created, you can actually return your frame to its actual size. So in this case, if we were building a desktop website, I may have the whole page shown here, but we know that the actual, what we call the fold, right, or where the actual browser window is going to end, is actually going to be much higher up on the page, probably something closer to, you know, about here or so. Again, you can use your presets, you can use different examples to understand exactly what your general folds are going to be, right? So whether you're designing for mobile or you're designing for desktop, that distance is going to be different. And this is something that actually content strategists put a lot of work into. What's the information that we need to see first versus what's the information that can come further down on the page? So to technically create this in Figma, once you have your content page created like this, the easiest thing you can do is actually just change the height of the frame. You may be familiar with the concept of constraints, right? Where if I go to grab a frame, let's say if something was accidentally set to, not accidentally, maybe intentionally set to constrain on the bottom like this, when you go to adjust your frame, stuff might start to move in ways that you didn't want it to. So the easiest thing that you can do is if you hold down the Command key, you'll see here that I can actually adjust the height of my frame and it actually ignores constraints. So that's a great shortcut for ignoring constraints as you're doing this. A couple other great shortcuts, and these aren't actually Figma specific, these will work on a lot of different systems, but if you are trying to do, say, like, let's say we do horizontal like this, if I hold down that Command key, again, I can do just the constraints from one side, but if I hold down Command and Option, I can actually do both sides simultaneously if I want to actually shrink the content this way. And then lastly, another great one, if you want to add in another shortcut there, you can do Command, Option, and Shift, which will actually give you proportional scaling while also ignoring constraints. You may or may not have a use for it, but it's a good little shortcut for resizing your frames. So as I mentioned, we want to actually reduce the height of the frame here. So I'm gonna actually adjust it up to here. And this is cool. This will actually, we now have content that is running off the frame, but we can't see it right now. So one other little trick would be to select your outer frame and say, uncheck clip content. So clip content means hide things that are off the frame. If you uncheck this, it's going to show you all of your content that extends beyond the frame. In this case, you can see that we actually have those other leaves showing up now because they're actually beyond the frame. Once you have content that goes beyond the edge of your frame, under the prototyping tab, we can actually adjust the overflow behavior and set what type of scrolling this frame should use, meaning that if there's more content on this page than I can see, enable scrolling in one of these directions. So I'm going to say vertical scrolling because we want to scroll up and down on this. I'm going to come back to our prototype, and you'll notice now we actually have the right height of our frame, and I can actually scroll the page up and down. So we've now enabled scrolling, or we've enabled overflow behavior on this frame, meaning now we can set up a scroll to interaction very easily. If you set up the scroll interaction first and it doesn't seem like it's working for some reason, so if you go in and you create the action, that's probably the first thing to check, because sometimes you may just have your full page and you forgot to adjust the height of the inner frame, or if you're getting very fancy with it, some designers will probably figure out ways to use components and instances to simulate that same sort of behavior in a more advanced way. Definitely check your overflow behavior, because this will be the first thing that you'll want to make sure is actually set correctly as well. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at one of these behaviors and how they work. So I'm going to select much like any of our other interactions, you're going to have the interaction is built up of a few different parts. There's basically what triggers the interaction, so the behavior that will trigger it, meaning the object that you've selected and exactly how it should interact with that object. The action that should occur, so what do you want Figma to actually do when you either click or drag or press a key or something like that, and then how it should actually create that transition. So in this case, I'm going to select our button here, and I put the interaction an on-click interaction on that. So one way to build these would be to go over to the menu, hit the plus sign, on-click. You can select scroll to, and then you can actually choose any of the layers that are within your current frame. So at the current level within the frame, you're actually going to see all the other layers available. This would be if you wanted to do this from the menu over here. The other quick way to do this is much like other prototyping connections. If you select a layer, you may remember that you can do this to select, you can do this to select other frames together. You can also now use this to select frames layers or objects that are within the same frame. And Figma will know that this is supposed to be a scroll to connection. So it will automatically give you an interaction detail that's set to scroll to, the name of the thing that you are scrolling to, and a few other behaviors that we're going to look at here as well. In fact, let's scroll even further down our page. I'm going to change this. I seem to have a dictionary shortcut set up. Geez, what's going on there? Okay, hold on a second, everyone. I'm just going to disable that. There we go. Oh, it's a long press. That's what's happening. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that, and there we go. Reset this to our lower object down here that's off the frame. So now we're telling it to scroll down and off the frame. If we go ahead and look back at our example, I'm going to hit scroll it. It scrolls. Now, this was set to instant. So much like any of our transitions, if we haven't set an animation, they're going to transition immediately to that location. Could be really useful. You might have some good examples of where you want to do that. In this case, though, let's actually animate this. I want to see this transition happen. And you'll notice that you can say animate. You'll get our built-in easing options as well. So if you want just a straight transition, you can do linear. If you want to have ease in and out, you can do that too as well. Ease in, back. These ease in, back, ease in, out, back, and ease in and out, back. Not an Australian thing, but what these will actually do is these create a curve that actually goes a little bit beyond the linear curve. In fact, outside of the bounds of the linear graph. So if we go to custom, and you'll see here that an out back would actually do something like this. So you'll get a little bit of a bounce with it as you're doing it. Might be the kind of thing that you want to do it. In this case, let's keep it simple. Generally, if you're scrolling to a location on a vertical page, you probably want something like ease in and out. This will start fast, slow down, start slow, so it'll ease into it, speed up a bit, and then it'll actually slow down again as you're reaching your destination, because this kind of feels like, this tends to feel like a natural way that you can scroll down your page. So let's go ahead and take a look at that again. I'll press R to restart my prototype. And we get the transition between the two. Now that was pretty fast. So let's go ahead and up this time to 1 second. So in this case, 1,000 milliseconds. Rerun that. And you'll see there we get a nice little scroll behavior. Amazing, all on the same page, all in the same frame. I didn't need extra frames. I didn't need to smart animate between layers. I didn't need to do any of that other stuff. It's just a nice, simple connection between the two. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is also dynamic. So if you're used to doing scrolling behaviors with things like offsets, you'll find now that these are actually all dynamic based on the position of the object that you selected. You do still have the ability to set offsets if you want to do that, but what's great about this is that if I change the position of this object like this, that scroll to is actually updated automatically and will only scroll to once that element is in view. This is a pretty amazing thing. You can imagine if you were working on a design for a home page and all of a sudden you want to switch a couple of the big sections around, like maybe you've got like a payment section or a pricing table or something like that, you can just swap them and you don't have to change any of the scroll connections at all. Great. So not only do we have vertical, but we also have horizontal. So let's just take a quick look at one of those examples. Again, same trick as before. I'm going to hold down Command to make my frame a bit smaller. I'm going to turn on clipping so we can actually see or turn off clipping so we can actually see our content. And then again, I'm going to select the prototype layer, grab my scroll interaction, grab the noodle from the button, and then drag it out to the element that I want to. You'll see scroll to takes effect automatically. Now remember, we do need to set that overflow behavior. If I don't turn this on and we try to run this prototype, in fact, let's just take a quick look, you'll notice that nothing's going to actually work because we don't have any way to scroll. There's no overflow set. So be sure to set that. In this case, I want to do horizontal scrolling. Cool. Awesome. Oh, and actually, I want to make sure that we have our destination set here correctly. Interesting. I would have thought that would have worked as expected. Hold on. Just double check here. Great. Okay. So what we're going to do is turn off this. Oh boy. Thanks all. I'm on a new computer, so I've got that nice dictionary behavior enabled. Here we go. There we go. I'm just going to update this, turn this off. Horizontal. Interesting. We might have to come back to my horizontal example here. Looks like I have everything inside my frame. There we go. This might have just been a little bit of a issue on my end as I was setting this up. Let's check this. Well, interesting. I do have that set to overflow. We'll move on to this one. I've got another example that we can take a look at of nested scrolling that will show this behavior a little bit better too as well. Great. Okay, so this might actually be all set now. Awesome. There we go. So the issue there was I just had the button selected and I was accidentally changing the overflow behavior on the button. these kinds of things happen, you know, as designers we're going through. There's a lot of different things to click on. So just make sure that you have the parent frame selected, right? Because that's going to be where all of your content is actually being set to overflow. Lastly, last example, again, keeping these kind of simple right now, but you'll see here that we have a giant frame with content in both directions. So if I wanted to, I could do the same behavior again. In this time, I'm actually going to set overflow behavior to both horizontal and vertical scrolling. Go back to my design, turn off that clip content so we can actually see it here as well. And then going to drag my prototype connection out to something that's off the frame. You'll notice here too that your animation effects are a little sticky in the sense that whatever animation timing you have set up previously, you're going to have that set to the default as you continue to create more connections as well, right? And that tends to be a pretty good heuristic because usually you're trying to simulate the same types of behaviors as we move around. Lots of different types of transitions or speeds of transitions might be confusing or strange. So, and generally that'll probably be how your developers are thinking about it too as well. You'll probably just have a couple basic transition types as you're scrolling down pages or across carousels and things like that. Cool. So last example here, we just take a quick look. This one is really powerful. And this is one that I think we're going to see a lot of really cool examples as to how people are using this. So you'll see this, we actually get scrolling across both axes. You can do both horizontal and vertical here. So these basic examples are pretty cool, but let's actually put this into practice with something that may make a little bit more sense. So let's take a look at our home page here. For anyone who's downloaded the plugin file, you might, the playground file, you might be familiar with this one that we have. Here we have a basic example where we've already done the reducing the size of the frame. So you can see here, the frame actually ends here. Content extends way down. And I want to just create a link between a services button and I want it to scroll down to my services area down here, right? Because the service area has a nice sort of heading and its own little background color and everything like that, I probably don't want to select just the services text because that's going to, when I actually create this, it's going to scroll it that far and the text is kind of going to be awkwardly near the top. So the easiest way to do that is that if you have a containing frame, something like a background color or something like that, you can use that as your scroll to destination. So in this case, if I wanted to, I'll go back to my services button, make sure we have our vertical scrolling on. Great, looks good. Back to services, and I'm just going to drag this down and connect it to this entire services section. Now, that might be a little bit hard to see, but you'll see that there's a connection line that's actually connecting right down to services here. Again, same timing on this. So let's go ahead and take a look at this example. I'm just going to present a new prototype. Awesome. And you'll see we get that nice, simple scroll animation, again, all with a single frame. So pretty awesome stuff with what we can do there. As I mentioned, it is also dynamic too as well, right? So the location of those anchors is going to change. So if we actually switch the order of these sections, or if we had more sections, or let's say we just wanted to add more content in here, right? So if we had another section that was actually going to be within our list of sections. In fact, if I, let's see if this will work real quick. If I just throw an auto layout on that real fast and I duplicate this section a few more times, you see we get an awesome little way that the page expands. So this is using auto layout as and one of the newer features that we just recently updated. You'll see that it actually creates my sections and able to quickly organize them. And in fact, I can move them around very quickly too as well, right? So if you're doing your design work where it's very compartmentalized like this, where you have different page sections, auto layout will make it really easy to move those around, and your scroll to links will update automatically as well. So you'll see that that connection to that services section is still connected all the way down to the bottom, even though I added more content in between. Cool. So let's look at another kind of interesting example here, which is that we can actually nest the scroll to destinations inside of other frames. So what I mean by that is, if I wanted to, before we were looking at examples where we were scrolling within the actual top level frame, as we call them, right? So in this last example, this is the top level frame. This frame has scrolling applied to it. But in this example, we're actually going to be scrolling this frame here. So you can see this nested frame that we have, this collection that I have right here. It's a collection of cards with auto layout on them. I think you probably saw this from some of Raji's examples that we had in one of the previous live streams. And what we're going to do is actually link that up to these buttons so that each of the buttons will take us to a specific one of these cards within this nested carousel. So again, the entire frame here itself is not actually scrolling, just the nested frame. So you can actually create that interaction as well. So if I wanted to, I'll come in here. Again, check my overflow behavior on my nested frame. In this case, we want horizontal scrolling. You can see that we already have content that's running off of it a little bit. And I'm going to grab those buttons. And again, I'm going to grab my first button and basically just drag the link to that inner card right there. And you'll see here that it's saying scroll to card, right? So I've actually selected that inner card in the collection and we've set up that one to connect to it. Let's do the same with our 2 and with our 3 as well. One interesting thing to note, you'll notice here that since this one was a main component, the other components will actually pick up that same behavior automatically. So if you are using main components, you may or may not want to have them actually in your carousel. It'll work for this example because I can just change the destination by dragging the noodle like this as well. But just something to keep in mind. If you're seeing connections where you may not have expected them, think about whether or not you're using instances or not, because those will actually keep the original connection that they had on them as well. And so you can see here that we're actually, for our destinations, what's really cool, and Aaron, Niko, I don't know if you have anything to add on this, but we actually have a few different groupings of destinations. We've actually got both of our nested frames as well as our top level frame as well. Does one of you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think that at this point also, I think that like what you mentioned in the beginning, I think that like for the top level frame, the scrolling for the top level frame basically is just defined through how you look at it in the viewer. So we expect it to always have the potential to be scrolling. And then in the drop-down menu, basically, what we do is we wanted for you to be able to pick things through the drop-down menu. But we also didn't want you to overload with all the possible children inside of the frame, basically. And so we decided that we want to show only the first level children of a scrollable container. And so if you open this again, if you open the menu again, Anthony, what you'll see is that we treat the top level frame. So in this case, this is a nested example, that we treat that as the first grouping. And then we treat we find other frames that have scroll, or like overflow scroll set. And we treat those as like subsequent groupings and then show the first level children inside of that.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can see here that we see the links to the top level frame and then the nested collection of these cards that I have here as well. Again, collection here is just a word that I'm using to mean a grouping of elements. It's not really a construct in Figma, but if you have a collection of cards or things like that, you'll hear that a lot of developers use that kind of language as well when they're talking about lists or table rows or card collections, things like feeds, or anywhere where you have a lot of similar or like items that you're trying to scroll through as well. Cool, so let's take a look at that example here, and we're on a new page, so I'm going to show a new prototype. And you'll see here that now we're able to actually, with our buttons linked up, we can actually scroll between our different cards that we have. Now, one interesting thing to note, because when I'm on something like the second card, because the third card here is already in view, there isn't going to be a way to scroll to it. If you wanted to add some centering so that you actually got a little bit more distance on that, you can add what's called an offset here as well, which will actually create a little bit of padding here on the left-hand side. Let's look at another offset example, and if there's time, we can come back to this one too to see how we could improve that. But let's go ahead and look at our original example again, right? So we had, in our basic example, we had a menu that was fixed at the top, right? So the menu scrolled with the page, but what happens if we have a menu that is actually fixed position while we're scrolling? So you'll notice that under the design panel, if I select something like this header, you'll see here that this has fixed position when scrolling selected. You can also see this in the layers panel on the left-hand side. You're gonna have fixed elements will actually be separated out from the scrolling elements. If we go to present this page, and again, just going to check my overflow settings. So we're set to vertical and the frame ends here. Let's go ahead and look at this. You'll see here that, again, that header stays fixed at the top. So if we try to recreate that same example as we did before, let's go ahead and grab our services button. And I'm going to actually make this a scroll to down to that services section again. So same behavior as we did before. Let's go ahead and look at this example. I'm just going to close those. There we go. Awesome. Cool, we get to scroll down to the services area, but maybe you can see the issue here, right? So one of the things is that we're actually covering up the services title, right? So we can't actually see the thing that we wanted to scroll to exactly, because scroll to is gonna work on the position on the outer frame. So in this case, the header is actually gonna be covering up the scroll to location. One way to fix this very quickly is you can add an offset. And generally speaking, a pretty good rule of thumb is take the height of the object that you're trying to, that is fixed, and use that as your offset height. So in this case, if I go back up to my header here, to my menu, and we look at the height of this menu. So this thing is header, there we go. You can see this has a height of 120, right? So what I can do is if I look at that, go back to that interaction that I just created, you'll see immediately below the scroll to, there's a couple of inputs where you can change what we call the offset. So this is where you can change the Y offset. So that's going to be the vertical offset, and the horizontal offset. Now I'm going to put 120 in here, a positive 120, and let's take a look at what happens. So if we come back here, and I'm going to say click on services, went a little bit further than we wanted it to, right? So this is actually 120 actually added to the offset, because if we think about how X and Y axes tend to work in digital design programs, interface design programs, you're gonna get positive in the down and right directions, and you're gonna get negative in the up and left directions. So we actually wanna create a negative offset here, because we're actually going backwards, right? So we're actually gonna go back up a little bit. So in this case, if we come back now, we replay that, you'll see we get the services menu stopping exactly where we want it to. So this is an interesting way that you can use offsets for this kind of scrolling behavior. Now, there are much more advanced ways that you could try and create this menu too, right? You could nest all of this content inside of a scrolling frame and not actually use fixed position at all. You'll just have two separate frames that appear as though it's a fixed menu at the top. I'm sure there will be some great advanced examples of that in the community as well. But this is a great way to quickly sort of get around that. So if your offset is not working, and you've got to present something in about 10 minutes or so, and you just can't get the heights right, definitely try messing with the offset a little bit and seeing if that helps you get exactly what it is that you're looking for. Then you can go back and figure out if there was a better object that you should have connected it to, or if you just want to continue using offsets like that. Keep in mind that the offset itself will always stay the same height as well. So if you happen to move your object or your layer, you're still going to have that same offset unless you update the offset as well. Cool. I'm loving all these comments, everyone. Yeah, scroll to is pretty amazing. It was actually one of our top requested features that we had. So when I saw that one coming through, I think it was like really high up on our list. I don't know how much I could talk about that stuff, but it was definitely one of the most requested features that we had. So. Great. So with that, I want to look at a couple more examples that we have here of what are some practical ways that we might use this, right? So we saw some pretty good ones as far as like marketing pages and home pages. What about something like an app environment? Well, there's a behavior that we see a lot, and you might be familiar with it. You may even do it absentmindedly without knowing, which is that, let's say you've scrolled pretty far down a page. You can, in a lot of apps these days, if you tap the home button, or if you, tap the button of the current page that you're on, you'll get almost like a back to top action where you can immediately scroll back to the top. So what we can do is, in our homepage example, if we wanted to, we could simply take something like a back to top button, and we could actually tie that to the top frame, and it would quickly go back up to the top. Keep in mind here, you're not going to want to use, if you have multiple frames on a page, you're going to notice that when you go to create an interaction, I'm zooming way out here because I just want to show you the full page. you're going to see that there's actually a little bit of a back button. Ignore that for when you're thinking about scroll to, because that's actually for back between page transitions, right? So, and that's still really, really valuable. And you're going to probably want to use that for other reasons. If you do want to create a back to top on a page, just link back up to an element that is at the top. So in this case, I have that whole header element that I could select, and that will take me right back up to the top as well. So back to our app example that we have here. I've got a collection here. And again, we can't see it because I don't have overflow turned on. Sorry, I don't have clip content turned off. So let's turn off clip content. Now you can see that there's actually a full feed that's running behind that fixed nav bar at the bottom. If we were to grab this and say on our top frame, we want vertical scrolling. So if we present this example here, you'll see here that we actually have a feed that we can scroll, much like we would have in an app environment or something like that. If I want to get quickly back up to the top, though, perhaps I want to be able to select that home button and actually bring us back up to the top of our page. So in this case, I'm going to grab the home button. I'm going to actually remove that first interaction that we have there and just drag out from the noodle. I like doing that a bit more. If you haven't heard them called noodles, that is a loving term that we use internally for the connection lines that you see. So the blue lines there. It's I'm not too sure of the history, Niko. Maybe you know a bit more there, but it's certainly it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think it's just out of lack of a better term. It's like, hey, those look like noodles.
Yeah. For anyone who has used interaction connections inside of components, you'll notice that when you create instances of those components, those same connection lines are going to be connected to the other elements that are on the same page as that component. So sometimes it may look like a lot. It's actually quite a few connections that you've actually had to create, but you can end up with these wonderful again, lovingly called pasta pictures sometimes, where if you don't have anything selected, you're going to see a bunch of the noodles. Once you select a frame, you're reduced to just the ones that are relevant to that frame, but it's pretty cute. Great, so in this case, I basically said I want to connect this to that nested feed, so that nested frame here with the feed, and I want to connect it to this very first item that's in the list. We're going to scroll up to the top, and if we go ahead and rerun this, if I scroll down my page at all and then I hit the home button, you'll see we get a nice scroll back up to the top. Generally in the app environments, I think that's transitions a bit faster, but hopefully you can see that one on the Zoom right here as well too. So, awesome. One other pretty cool example that we have is, and this is getting into some really interesting stuff. So Miguel, one of our Figmates, is able to found out some really cool stuff that you can do with map centering. So because we have access to both offsets, right? So we can do both horizontal and vertical at the same time. We could do some things like moving to different parts of a map when something is selected. In this example that we have here, and this is the one that you'll find in the playground file, we're just doing a simple centering. So this is a really nice little interaction that you'll see in a lot of apps, where if you are near something or you're selecting something that is close to what's being selected, it'll actually recenter that object for you. So in this case, if I were to actually click on, let's go ahead and actually hook things up though, shall we? That might make it a little bit easier. I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at our map example here. I've got our map, I've got a fixed bar at the bottom. I'm gonna turn on overflow horizontal and vertical scrolling for this, I believe. Oh, no, sorry, it's inside of our map. We have horizontal and vertical scrolling set up, so we actually don't need that one. And then what I wanna have in here is that with these pins that I have here selected, each of these pins, I want them to actually recenter the map for me automatically by just bringing the content into view. So the easiest way you could do that is that you can take the pin, and again, this is a pin that is actually nested inside of the map that is moving. So if you think about that for a second, the interaction is actually on the exact same, in the same frame that I'm also telling to move at the same time or be scrolled to. So in this case, I'm going to take this pin and say, I want to bring this whole menu item into view. So in fact, let's just do it without the on-click interaction. So there we go. Awesome. So scroll to this card and animate it in, meaning that I'm going to click on this pin and I want to scroll this card into view. If we go ahead and we check that one here, you can see what happens, right? So it actually pulls it into view. Now, if I wanted to clean this up a little bit, I could go ahead and do things like add offsets, right? So I know that I want to actually probably have that be a bit more centered in my design as I'm going through this. You'll find this one in the playground file too, if you need a little bit of help with this example. But we do something like 60 pixels over 120 pixels. Oops, sorry, 60 pixels over 120 pixels down. And not actual pixels there, by the way. I'm just saying pixels, just think more of abstract than pixels. And again, we want to make sure that we get those going in the right direction here. So let's go ahead and, funny enough, this one might actually be reversed from what I was saying before here. There we go. So these two, I'm actually going to reverse their positions so that we get something. And you can see how much I can mess with this if I wanted to. And we can bring these things into view. Now, again, this is a rather trivial example, but you could imagine doing this on a better page. Another way to accomplish this, if you didn't want to deal with offsets, is you could probably hide an entire frame in here that was the size of the window that you wanted it to, and it'll pull it into view exactly how you wanted. Again, these are getting into some more advanced nuanced cases. You're going to see a lot of really new cool files in the community that are coming out to show off some of these things. One more that I want to draw attention to that I think is pretty fun is an example from Louis, actually one of our other designer advocates. He recently posted this file, so if you want to find it, we will drop a link in the channel for that as well. But what's going on here is that he's actually got other frames nested inside of a single frame, something that you might normally think that you'd be using transitions for, right? Because you want to go to the right or to the top or something like that. But what's really cool about using this with scroll to is that you can do transitions that previously were hard to accomplish. So things like diagonals, right? So if we look at these prototyping connections that we have here, and in fact, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and grab a copy of his file here because I realized I may have broken the connections when I brought them in. So let's go ahead and grab his file. Awesome. So again, for anybody who's brand new to Figma, the community, you can just go and grab anybody's work that they've published and made available to the community, where you can come in and grab different examples, as you can see here. So let's look at this 45-degree angle version that we have here. By the way that this is set up, you'll see here that I'm actually able to do these really, really cool transitions that we could normally do up and down before, but now I can also do 45-degree scrolling. In this case, we're using this as in a full page example. I think, Niko, you brought up a good point that like what this really helps to accomplish is sort of, you may have a mental model that you're trying to get users to understand about how things are related to each other, and being able to give people direct positions and locations can really be helpful for that too as well. I think another great example where you could think of this is, imagine if you had an entire map or maybe a process diagram or something like that, and you wanted to actually zoom in on certain locations and be able to quickly navigate and move around it. True, you could do this with a lot of frames and a lot of smart animate transition layers and things like that, but here we're able to actually accomplish that pretty quickly with just actually moving back and forth, just using the scroll to interaction behavior. Very cool. Awesome. So with that, I had a couple more questions for the team, and then we'll take some questions from the Q&A that has come in as well too. But Niko, we covered it a little bit around just sort of why and how we ended up with having two different behaviors for the nested. So what going back to our conversation around interaction types and having both access to a top level frame and a nested collection, how and like, why was this important to us? Why did we want to build this?
I think that so when we first, the way we kind of like build these features, or kind of like how we go about them, is that we bring them onto staging at some point once they kind of like feel more ready. And staging is kind of like our internal environment, which we also use just for designing Figma in Figma on the staging version of Figma. It's like a little bit of an inception there. And then we try out these features and kind of like send them around to the team, send them to the designer advocates. And in this particular example, Rogi, another designer advocate, was trying this out. And what we've seen is that our initial assumption of people will want to, it's okay for people to connect just to the first level children. Like that simplification will make it easier to understand. We realized that that was actually something that broke a use case in which you're using inside a scrollable frame, you're using an auto layout frame to organize the contents. And at that moment, every card you want to scroll to is a second order child, essentially. And so we can't, at that moment, kind of like we realize, okay, shit, this is not working. We have to find a way around this. But our initial goal still stood, which was, can we make this drop-down menu not show every child of this frame? Because sometimes people have like super complicated frames with a lot of children, and we just didn't want to have like a super endless long drop-down menu. And so that's why we decided on the separation, where it's like, if you see something, you can drag the noodle to pick that object directly. But we don't show this as an option to pick, because that would mean we have to show all the other children as well. And so with this, it's basically kind of like going two different routes. If you go through the drop-down menu, you get like a slightly simplified view. But if you use the on-canvas interactions, you get like a more powerful way of picking exactly which object you'd like. And yeah, so we hope that makes this feature approachable for people like generally using the mouse and going over the properties panel, while still retaining the functionality to be able to scroll to kind of like more like deeper level nested children.
Yeah, and you can really feel it when you start actually using the feature too. That it's just it feels really intuitive to be able to say, oh yeah, I want to select a nested item within that frame. One quick sort of best practice just to throw out there for anyone who's trying to accomplish it. Let's say you wanted to actually scroll down your page and then scroll through a different, so like scrolling down vertically and then scrolling across horizontally. You are going to want to still set those up as you might have with multiple frames. So you'll do one for getting down there, or a separate interaction. So you can either have it all on one page and just have two separate scroll to containers, which is totally works. If you were trying to bring both of those interactions together, just do it as you were doing before, where you would have it scroll. You might have a separate frame that already has that destination sort of set up, and you can interact between the two using a delay or something like that. There's some really good examples in the community, and we can I'll tweet out a couple links after this too as well. One last question that I just wanted to ask, Aaron, kind of related to that, how do we actually pick the frame that should be scrolled to? What's going on there?
Yeah. So initially we were thinking, well, first in the beginning, since we can only pick objects that were direct children, first level children of scrollable containers or the top level frame, it was fairly easy to determine which one was the scrolling container. It was its parent. But now that we updated that to account for auto layout frames and a variety of other situations, we came to this realization that, well, maybe an object could have multiple ancestors that are scrollable. So how do we know which one is the scrollable container? Is it, maybe the auto layout frame that it's its parent, or is it the top level frame? So we thought maybe we should have an option for a designer to select, this is the scrollable container, and this is the object it's scrolling to. But while that is a bit more flexible, we realized when the designer is dragging something on the canvas, it just didn't feel right to have that separated. So that was a trade-off that was a bit tricky. Do we want to limit the possibilities of what a designer can do? But we also want to make it as approachable as possible. So right now, when you select a particular object, whatever the first ancestor that is scrollable is the scrollable container. So yeah.
Awesome, very cool. We had a couple great questions coming in from the chat, so I just want to go to those real quick here. Oh, seem to have lost my presentation, so I'll just hop back to the thing here. Great. So a couple quick questions that I saw come in through the Q&A, and again, thank you for everybody. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask them now. We will be talking about this for a bit too as well. So afterwards on Twitter and things like that. So if more questions come up, you can definitely just tweet at us. And happy to answer or talk through any of that as well. So there's a question that came up. In fact, a couple people were asking very similar questions, which was around something like the example that I had there on that services menu. Let's go back and take a look at that and just realize it's all in the same window. There we go. Something like the services menu, right? Like you may want to show that the services item has actually been selected, especially with something like an offset version where you're going to have the menu there always present. You may want to show that type of interaction. Another similar to that question was like, can we have micro interactions that might work along with these? Niko, any context there on how somebody might think about that as we're going forward, or ways to unlock that in the future?
Yeah, I think that's why we mentioned in the beginning that this is kind of like the start of on-screen interactions. Whereas basically it's a very simple, it's ultimately the feature right now is a simple first step. You can move content around, you can kind of like shift it into its position, but what you still can't do, and I think with like kind of like goes into micro interactions, is how objects behave when other objects change. So kind of like when this is scrolling and it reaches a certain point, make this one sticky, change this one, or change the state of this object. And as I said earlier, kind of like at config, we announced interactive components. That's like another step. It still won't get you there. There's a couple of more things that we need to do for this, but kind of like the ability of like on-screen interactions and controlling how things relate to each other, it's definitely something on our mind.
Awesome. Yeah, as soon as I started using this and just sort of thinking about it, immediately my thought was, oh, interactive components could unlock so much for me with some of this stuff. In fact, that takes us to a kind of an important example to just sort of discuss real quick, which is that because we are all in the same frame, giving individual elements some sort of highlighted state, right? Like, so let's say if I want to click to the third, scroll over, but I also want to highlight that this third button has been selected, right? So as we were just discussing, this will be unlocked with some cool features in the future. If you need to accomplish this now, you can certainly continue to use, you can still build this with multiple frames using animate between layers, or even just having different states. So if I wanted to, I could actually have several versions of this frame, and sorry for the Mac bug there. You'll see here that I could then have this one be in view, and I could actually animate between the layers. We have lots of other great resources on exactly how Smart Animate and Smart Animate between layers work, so I'm not going to cover it right now, but just know that those options are not mutually exclusive. If you have something that's working today in that way, and you're happy with it, that's okay. This is just another way that you can accomplish that kind of behavior as well. So, great. Well, I think we are getting pretty close to time. Thank you, everybody, for all of the great questions that we had. A couple other things, again, just to re-mention, check out the community file if you have not. It's pretty helpful as far as getting started and things like that. Also, the resources that we have in the Help Center are going to be great for that kind of stuff. We also have another upcoming live stream actually on Wednesday, so tomorrow. We're going to do an In the File, so I'll be walking through with Renee from LinkedIn and Ash from GitHub to talk a bit more about some of their methodologies and creative design performances and the design processes and things like that. Again, all future live streams are available at figma.com/events. All past live streams can be accessed from there. You can also get them straight from our YouTube channel as well. And if you have any ideas, we are always looking to make this more exciting, more inviting and engaging. So definitely reach out to us at community@figma.com, or you can always tweet to us too as well. I want to give a huge thank you to Aaron and Niko for joining us today. It's always really fun to actually have the product team on here with us. I'm hoping you guys will come back and join us in the future too as well.
Sweet, thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Well, thanks everyone, and have fun scrolling. All the places you'll scroll. I'm gonna stop now. We didn't keep a count.